The debrief room smelled of oil, jasmine, and old paper, the smell of a workshop folded into a study. It was Ken Alka's way of saying the past was still in business. Blinking monitors along one wall, a single red recording light over a steel table in the center, and on a shelf, two scale models under glass. Canaan 1 and Egypt 2, his prototype jets from a decade that had believed in metaphors as much as metal. Ken liked metaphors that arrived pre-engineered. To him, a plane was not only thrust and drag, it was a life policy, a discipline. Canaan 1 had been built with long glides in mind, stabilizers tuned to hold, wings shaped to return. Egypt 2 had been built for burst, quick climbs, fast corrections, razor turns. He'd made them for his sons long before his sons knew flight. Now, in the late light of Nairobi's evening, he called those sons home. Reuben arrived first, soil under his nails, the faint smell of electrical ozone about his coat. He moved with the calm of someone who had spent years coaxing machines to sleep. In Nakuru, Canaan Systems Lab had become a place where servers and seedlings shared racks, a studio for systems that learned mercy. Joseph came in after him, hair still damp from the long flight from Cairo, a phone warm in his pocket like a second pulse. He had the posture of someone who never quite turned off readiness. In the last decade, he had become the sort of professional everyone relied on when time tore, a virtual executive assistant whose phone lit up in other people's midnight, who kept reputations intact with a sequence of precise replies. Ken watched them take their seats at the steel table. He didn't ask them, "How are you?" He didn't need to. He started, as he always had, with calibration. "Engine checks first," he said, the way a mechanic reads an engine's cough. "Tell me this, what were you built to do?" Reuben folded his hands and answered with a breath. "To tend, to keep systems alive without exhausting them, to teach machines when to rest." Joseph's reply came quicker, practiced, almost proud. To prevent collapse, to be ready when everything falls apart, to make sure crisis response is immediate and clean. Ken nodded, his face a map of history. He turned the models slowly between his palms. Canaan 1 for stillness, Egypt 2 for speed. I designed them as balance. One without the other is a fault. He clicked the recorder. The red light paid attention. Ken debriefed like an interrogator who loved the people he interrogated. His questions were thin and surgical, not to accuse, but to reveal systems thinking where emotion hid. "Walk me through a failure," he said. "Not a metaphor, a failure in the field. Tell me what failed first. Sensors, assumptions, the hand that flipped the switch." Reuben spoke of nights in the lab when Mercy windows clashed with market forces. He spoke of a satellite feed that misaligned with a rural clinic's clock, and how he had to decide whether to override algorithmic fairness to save a life. "We coded for rest," he said, "but we were naive about people who profit from non-rest. Mercy has a cost. Someone pays." Joseph described a different failing, a CEO's private email leaked, a travel itinerary rerouted into danger, a legal threat that arrived on Friday night. He described the exact moment when a spare protocol failed because an executive refused to name the right contact. "Crisis," he said, "is not polite." He'd learned to make it polite for everyone else. That was his craft, and it had kept agencies whole and families intact. He did not romanticize it. He cataloged it. Ken listened and then leaned forward, voiced the soft metal of a late engineer. "Operation Mercy Loop," he said, the old project name that had hung in his lab like a blueprint. It was never about automation and forever memory, boys. I wanted continuity, not immortality. I wanted systems that could hand off, that could degrade without trauma. I wanted you to know when to throttle and when to land. Reuben closed his eyes. "We turned it into a religion," he said. "We thought if the colonel could remember everything, people would never lose anything. But memory full is suffocation." "And we turned it into fuel," Joseph said. "People monetize sleeplessness. Perpetua learned to sell desire. I learned how to patch the burn." Ken set the model jets down with the care of someone closing a book. "You both did what you were designed to do," he said. "But design needs handoff. An aircraft must be flown, and then it must be told to land. Otherwise, you fly until the map is a blur." They sat with the sentence between them. Outside, Nairobi's street lamps were steady, but inside the room there was a kind of stately quiet. Not absence, but attention. Ken reached under the table and produced 2 handwritten flight logs he had kept since his early projects. The edges were softened by decades of handling. I taught you resilience by building machines, he said. But you must teach the next generation mercy by teaching them forgetting. That's the relay. Joseph, speed, you teach the code of stop. Reuben, stillness, you teach the code of return. Joseph's fingers closed around his log like a pilot's grip. I don't want to stop being useful, he admitted. The confession had the weight of a landing gear retracting. I'm afraid they'll fall apart without me. Reuben's hand covered his brother's on the table. They will fall sometimes, he said, but that is when we teach them to stand. Ken clicked the recorder off with a small, decisive motion. The red light extinguished. He breathed out as if releasing ballast. That's enough uptime for one lifetime, he said, and there was no irony in it. It was a verdict and a benediction. They left the debrief room together into Nairobi's night. They walked past the garden where Ken kept a small wind vane and a hardened workshop bench. Reuben stopped and pulled a small seed packet from his coat pocket, a trivial inheritance really, and pressed it into Joseph's palm. For the places you can't rest, Reuben said. Plant something there. Let it remind you to come back. Joseph regarded the packet, then looked at his siblings. His phone buzzed, a distant insistence. He silenced it. For the first time in many years, he let the buzz go unanswered. It felt startlingly like peace. The three men stood under a single street lamp. Ken looked at his sons, then at the stars, then at the two model jets in his car's boot. Operation Mercy Loop was never about performance metrics, he said. It was about inheritance. You each have a part to fly and a part to land. Don't confuse the two. Joseph smiled, not entirely sure whether the smile was a surrender or a return. Reuben's shoulders, steadier now, despite everything he had carried, relaxed enough to breathe. As they walked back to the house, Ken switched off the porch light with one finger. The dark was not empty, it was filled with potential. That's enough uptime for one lifetime, he repeated, quieter now, like a prayer. Joseph tucked the seed packet into his pocket. Reuben felt the familiar hum of his own work beneath his skin, but it had shifted from a demand to a stewardship. They were not fixed by code or by title. They were, finally, in dialogue. Later that night, in the quiet of his Nakuru lab, Reuben sat before a rack where seedlings and servers shared shelf space. He opened a fresh document and typed a single line for the students who would one day inherit his work. Open quote. Teach your systems how to land. Close quote. Across the sea in Cairo, Joseph turned off his last screen and, without making a spectacle of it, let himself sleep. The phone would ring in the morning. It would be answered. But now, for the first time in many years, he did not answer in terror. Back in Nairobi, Ken closed his workshop door and, for the first time in a long while, listened to the quiet as if it were a welcome instrument. The recorder in the debrief room, now dark, held a file, a gentle human conversation between three engineers at the end of a relay. The file would be archived, not to be mined but to be returned in seasons, to teach, to remind, to stop. And when the lights finally dimmed, Ken smiled and said, as he had said before and would say again if needs be, that's enough uptime for one lifetime. Layout suggestions. Rest assured, the finals. Title, Rest Assured, large, bold serif, centered. Subheading, a rest assured story, small caps, italic, below title.